There's a certain kind of silence that follows betrayal. It's the quiet that hangs in the air when you realize that what you believed in, what you built your life around, was never real. In 2014, that silence stretched across continents, from small towns in Brazil to immigrant neighborhoods in Massachusetts. It was the sound of millions of dreams collapsing, quietly, painfully, under the weight of a company called TelexFree. They said it was the future, an online business anyone could join, a way to work from home, make money, and finally, escape the grind. They promised freedom, digital, financial, personal. But what TelexFree really sold was hope, and they sold it for $1 billion. The story begins with a phone service, a cheap, internet-based calling plan called 99 TelexFree. The idea sounded simple enough. Let people make international calls for a fraction of the price. It was pitched as a revolution for immigrants who missed their families, people who just wanted to hear a familiar voice across oceans. But behind the screens and slogans, something else was happening. TelexFree wasn't making money from phone calls. They were making money from people. To participate, you didn't need to sell the service. You just needed to invest hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars to become a promoter. In return, you'd post ads online and supposedly earn guaranteed weekly profits. If you recruited others, you'd earn even more. A business where everyone wins. Until, of course, someone doesn't. The first warning signs came quietly. In Brazil, regulators began to notice that the math didn't add up. TelexFree claimed to have millions of users, but only a fraction of them were actually buying the phone service. Most of the money was flowing between investors, not from customers. It was the classic shape of a Ponzi scheme, disguised as digital opportunity. Old investors being paid with new investors' money, over and over, until the music stopped. But by the time it did, TelexFree had already spread like wildfire. Church groups, neighborhood gatherings, WhatsApp chats, it was everywhere. People sold their cars, mortgaged their homes, emptied their savings accounts, because everyone around them was making money, at least for a while. One woman in Rio de Janeiro told reporters she thought she was investing in her family's future. She joined after her cousin made enough to buy a new motorcycle. 3 months later, the cousin lost everything, and so did she. "I thought it was God's blessing," she said. "Now I can't even pay my rent." In communities like hers, TelexFree became more than a company. It became a movement. The founders promised jobs without bosses, freedom without risk, success without privilege. And that message resonated with people who'd been locked out of traditional finance their entire lives. It wasn't greed, it was faith. But even faith has limits. In April 2014, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission finally moved in. They called TelexFree a billion-dollar pyramid scheme. Accounts were frozen, offices raided, and the empire of promises began to crumble. Investigators uncovered layers of deceit, spreadsheets showing almost no real product sales, money trail after money trail, leading to personal accounts, shell companies, and luxury real estate. Because as it turned out, some of the cash, money that came from ordinary people's dreams, was funneled into high-value properties, lavish homes, commercial buildings, even speculative land deals that never existed. It was a textbook example of laundering fraud through luxury. TelexFree's founders, Carlos Wanzeler and James Merrill, had built not just a company, but an illusion so powerful that it crossed borders and blinded entire communities. When investigators opened the books, the truth was staggering. Less than 1% of TelexFree's revenue came from its supposed phone service. The rest, hundreds of millions, came from new recruits. They were selling belief, not bandwidth. In Massachusetts, court documents showed how funds were transferred into personal accounts and hidden in property deals. One transaction led to $1 million home purchased in cash. Another to land bought in Florida under a relative's name. Money was everywhere and nowhere. It was greed disguised as innovation, fraud disguised as opportunity, and trust disguised as friendship. But this wasn't just about numbers. It was about people. About a father in Boston who sold his truck to join TelexFree, a mother in Sao Paulo who withdrew her life savings, a nurse in the Philippines who convinced her church group to invest. When it all collapsed, the losses weren't just financial, they were personal. Because scams like this don't just steal money, they steal faith. Faith in community, in business, in the idea that good things can happen if you just work hard enough. In 2017, James Merrill was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Carlos Wanseler fled to Brazil, where he still faced charges. The victims, meanwhile, are still waiting. Some hope for restitution through bankruptcy proceedings. Others have simply tried to move on. But what made TelexFree unique wasn't just its size. It was how it blurred the line between technology and trust, between entrepreneurship and exploitation, between connection and control. It showed how easily the language of innovation, apps, online business, digital freedom, can be used to prey on hope. You see, TelexFree didn't just promise money. It promised meaning. It gave people a story to believe in. A simple equation: work hard, share the opportunity, and the universe will reward you. That's a beautiful story. Until you realize someone else wrote the ending. When you strip away the headlines and the legal documents, what's left are thousands of broken stories. Families torn apart, friendships ruined, communities divided. And somewhere beneath it all, a haunting question lingers. How do you rebuild trust once it's been sold for profit? The fall of TelexFree isn't just a cautionary tale about greed or fraud. It's a mirror held up to our collective desire to believe in something bigger than ourselves, to believe that success is just one click away, that a new technology can save us from old struggles. But sometimes behind the promise of progress lies the oldest trick in the book. And so, TelexFree became more than a scheme. It became a symbol, a monument to what happens when dreams become currency. A billion-dollar illusion built on the simple, devastating power of belief. As investigators continue to recover what they can and victims piece their lives back together, one truth remains. Hope is powerful, but when it's sold, it can destroy more than it creates. So the next time someone offers you a shortcut to freedom, remember this story. Remember TelexFree. And remember that real opportunity doesn't need a password or a promise. It just needs honesty. Fade to silence. Because in the end, the real cost of a Ponzi scheme isn't the money that's lost. It's the faith that's taken with it.